Today, Dr. Zoon will show you how to build the Delta Dart. After explaining some of the principles of flight, Dr. Zoon will construct the Delta Dart using the Pittsco Timber Cutter and Easy Cutter. Finally, he'll test the Delta Dart.
Hello, kids! Today we're going to be working with one of America's favorite rubber band-powered airplanes, the Delta Dart. To build the Delta Dart plane, we will need the Delta Dart kit, which includes the motor stick or fuselage, 1/16 inch by 1/8 inch balsa strip, a rubber band motor, a propeller assembly, and a pattern sheet. We will also need the following tools: a piece of cardboard or paper-covered styrofoam, a sharp hobby knife, straight pins, a timber cutter or an easy cutter, and glue. I am going to be using Pittsco's Instacure adhesive, which is a cyanoacrylate or CA type adhesive. Your teacher may have you use other varieties of glues or glue sticks. I prefer the Instacure adhesive as it is lightweight and provides an extremely strong joint. If you use other varieties of glue, be sure to include adequate drying time for the glue. Kids, when you are using a CA-type adhesive like Instacure, be careful not to get it on your skin, as it will bond the skin tightly together. Also, use safety glasses to keep your eyes safe from the adhesive. Thrust is a force that moves the plane forward. On most airplanes, propellers or jet engines produce thrust. With the Delta Dart, thrust is produced by a propeller connected to a tightly wound rubber band. Before this airplane can fly, we have to build it. So let's get started. To begin, we will tape the pattern to the foam board, printed face down. Using a sharp hobby knife, we will cut a slit in the pattern from point A to point B. We'll add a line of adhesive in the cross-hatched area just behind the slit that we just made. Use the point or tip of the applicator to spread the adhesive out evenly. Be careful to keep the adhesive away from the slit that we just made, or your pattern may stick to the foam board. Position the balsa fuselage over the pattern such that the tapered portion of the fuselage corresponds with the crosshatched area. Press the fuselage into place. We will be cutting many pieces of balsa sticks to build this plane. We can make the cuts using a timber cutter, an easy cutter, or a hobby knife. Your teacher may decide which one you will use. Using 1/16 inch by 1/8 inch balsa sticks, we will need to cut a piece of balsa that fits in the vertical position on the rudder section of the plane. Align the end of the stick with the bottom of the fuselage. Then mark and cut the stick. Be sure the piece fits correctly. Place a balsa stick across the fuselage and the vertical piece that we just cut. Position it at the diagonal over the pattern where indicated. Mark the angle which the piece intersects with the fuselage. I'll cut the piece at the mark using the Pittsco timber cutter. Place the piece back into position and make sure that the angled end fits flush with the fuselage. Once the stick has the correct fit, mark the angle at the other end of the stick where it overlaps the vertical piece of the rudder. This time I'm going to cut the piece with our hobby knife. Once the two pieces of the rudder section fit, remove the sticks and place a line of adhesive along the pattern where the diagonal piece will be positioned. Place a drop of adhesive on each end of the diagonal piece and position it on the pattern. Place a line of adhesive on the pattern where the vertical stick will be positioned. Place a drop of adhesive on the edge of the stick where it will be attached to the end of the fuselage. Place the vertical stick into position. Adjust the positions of the pieces so they fit snugly. Then press both the pieces onto the pattern. Give the adhesive a few minutes to dry. Using the hobby knife, cut the pattern around the rudder section. Starting at point A, cut along the top of the fuselage, then along the outside of the diagonal piece, down the outside of the vertical piece, and across the bottom of the fuselage to point B. Remove the assembled fuselage and rudder section from the pattern. We have the fuselage and rudder section complete. The rudder section can also be called a vertical stabilizer. Let's work on making the wings of the Delta Dart. First, we will mark and cut out a piece of balsa for one of the perimeter pieces of the wing. Place the stick back into position and mark the angle where the two pieces will meet. Position the two pieces on the pattern and check to see that they fit properly together. Remove the pieces and place a line of adhesive on the pattern where one of the pieces was. Place the piece back into position on the pattern and press into place. Place a line of adhesive on the pattern where the other piece will go and add a drop of adhesive to the end of the balsa stick that will attach to the piece we just glued down. Press the second piece into position. We will repeat the process for the other two perimeter pieces, marking and cutting them to fit to each other and to the existing pieces on the pattern, then gluing them together in place. Be sure to place a drop of adhesive on the end of each piece where it will be connecting to another piece. Let the adhesive dry for a few minutes before proceeding. Mark and cut the two brace pieces to fit on the wing. Check the fit of the pieces. Add a drop of adhesive to each end of a piece and add a line of adhesive to the pattern where the piece will go. Press the piece into position and repeat the process for the other brace. Now we will mark and cut the centerpiece. This piece will have a point on each end and should fit snugly into place between the existing perimeter at the center of the wing. Mark one end of a balsa stick, indicating the angle one of the perimeter pieces is making with it. Cut this angle, then cut an angle opposite to this angle to make a point at the center of the stick. Check the fit. Mark one of the angles at the other end. Cut it at a corresponding angle to make a point. You may want to cut the piece just a little long, as it is easier to take a little more off than to cut a whole new piece, if it's too short. Check the fit of the center stick. Once you are satisfied with the fit, add a drop of adhesive to both ends of the piece and place a line of adhesive on the pattern where the piece will go. Press the piece into position. The wing section of the Delta Dart is now complete. Let's work on the tail section, or horizontal stabilizer, of the plane. We will construct the tail section of the plane like we did the wing section, marking and cutting our pieces of balsa to fit together over the pattern and gluing them into place. Mark cut and check the fit of these two pieces first. Add adhesive to the ends that connect and to the pattern where the pieces will go. Press the pieces into place. Mark, cut, and check the fit of the third piece of balsa. Add adhesive to each end of the stick and to the pattern. Press the stick into position. Allow the adhesive to dry a few minutes. We have finished the tail section, and we are ready to cut out the tail section and the wing section that we have built. Using the hobby knife, cut around the perimeter of the pattern of the tail section and of the wing section. Remove these sections from the pattern. The next step in the construction process is to balance the propeller. To do this, first determine which side of the propeller is heavier by holding the socket and positioning the propeller so that the blades are horizontal. Let go of the propeller and see what happens. If one of the blades moves down, it is a heavier blade. If the propeller does not move, make sure you are holding the socket steady and the propeller is not rubbing against the socket or the bent end of the shaft. To balance the propeller, scrape some plastic off the front of the propeller of the blade that was heavier. You can use a hobby knife, but my preference is a carving knife with a curved blade like this. Use the knife in a scraping motion with the blade tilted slightly away from you, lightly pushing down while you move the blade away from you. After we've scraped off some plastic, we'll check the balance again. We'll repeat this process until the propeller is balanced. Now that we have our propeller balanced, we will attach it to the fuselage by pushing the socket of the propeller onto the free end of the fuselage. Be sure the shaft and hook are below the fuselage like this. Next, we will attach the wing to the fuselage. To do this, make 2 marks on the top of the fuselage, one at 2 centimeters and one at 17 centimeters. Place a line of adhesive along the top of the fuselage between the 2 marks. Place the wing section on top of the fuselage between the 2 marks, with the center stick of the wing directly on top of the fuselage. Pin in place using 2 straight pins. Before the adhesive dries, turn the plane over and pin one wingtip to the foam board. Raise the fuselage so that the tip of the rudder section and the propeller are just touching the surface of the foam board. Pin the other wingtip to the foam board and hold it in this position. Apply extra adhesive on each side joint between the fuselage and the wing at both the front and the back of the wing. Once the wings are pinned in place, set the vertical stabilizer to a 90-degree angle to the surface. Use pins on either side of the vertical stabilizer to hold it in position. Place a line of adhesive on the printed face of the horizontal stabilizer along the dashed line from the front to the back. Position the horizontal stabilizer printed face down on the bottom of the fuselage, with the back of the stabilizer at the back of the plane. Center the horizontal stabilizer so that the dashed line is aligned with the center of the fuselage. Press the horizontal stabilizer into place. Hold the stabilizer parallel to the work surface until the adhesive is set. If you want, you can support one or both tips of the horizontal stabilizer to a height equal to the height of the vertical stabilizer. Let the adhesive dry completely. Now that the adhesive has dried, we can remove the pins. Check the wings and horizontal stabilizer to be sure they are tightly attached. If necessary, pin the plane back into position and add more adhesive. From this point on, be very careful in handling the plane, as the wing angle makes it fragile. Here it is, the Delta Dart plane, ready to fly, almost. It is still lacking one thing though, a motor. For the Delta Dart plane to fly, we must provide thrust. Thrust will come from the propeller turning, but we must provide energy to turn this propeller. This energy will come from energy we are going to store in a rubber band. The scientific name for stored energy is potential energy. We will insert a straight pin into the bottom of the fuselage just in front of the horizontal stabilizer. Be sure to insert the pin at about a 45-degree angle. The pin should go into the wood at least 1/8 inch. Kids, be careful when you are inserting the pin. Keep your fingers away from the area underneath the pin point. Also, be sure to hold the plane only by the fuselage or you might damage the wing. Place one end of the rubber band motor on the propeller hook. Place the other end over the slanted pin. Now we are ready to supply the rubber band with some energy. Hold the fuselage under the wing with one hand. With the plane pointed toward you, use the other hand to rotate the propeller clockwise. This will begin winding the rubber band. The energy we are using to wind the propeller is kinetic energy, or energy of motion. This kinetic energy is being transformed into potential energy that will be stored in the rubber band. Count the number of complete turns. For the first few flights, you'll want to have about 50 turns. If the plane flies correctly, then you can increase the number of turns to 100. Let's give our Delta Dart its first flight. I've wound the rubber band up with 50 turns and it's ready to go. When I let go of the propeller, the potential energy in the rubber band will be converted into kinetic energy, which will cause the propeller to rotate. This rotation will pull the plane forward through the air, and as the plane moves forward, the air moving across the wing will produce lift. To launch the Delta Dart, hold it by the fuselage under the wing with the front of the plane slightly higher than the back of the plane. Hold the wound propeller with the other hand. Gently push the plane forward as you release the propeller. For your first flight, it's best to be in a large indoor room like a gymnasium. If you must fly the plane outside, be sure to pick a calm day. You may want to use a winder like this one to help you wind the rubber band motor. Depending upon the model of the winder, it will turn the propeller 5 or more times for each turn of the handle. This will speed up the winding process. Test fly your plane several times to determine how it is flying. Depending upon how it flies, you may want to use some of the following tips to improve the performance of your plane. If your plane does not fly correctly, try adding trim tabs. Trim tabs modify how the air is traveling across the surfaces of the plane. Trim tabs can be made of stiff typing paper, or you can use Post-it notes that have been trimmed to 3/4 inch by 2 inch rectangles. If you just want to experiment, use these Post-it notes. If the tabs work, then you can use adhesive to make the tabs permanent. First, try one on the back edge of each wing, about 1 to 2 inches in from the wing tip. Test fly the plane again. If needed, bend the tabs down slightly, about 4 degrees at a time. Test the plane again and bend the tabs until the best performance is obtained. If your plane is diving, that is, flying steeply towards the ground, or stalling, rising steeply and then falling, you may want to try trim tabs on the back of the horizontal stabilizer. Position them about 1/2 to 1 inch away from the wing tips. To control a dive, bend the trim tabs up slightly. To control a stall, bend them down slightly. Bend the tab on the vertical stabilizer to change the turning radius of the plane. Kids, the Delta Dart is a great plane for learning about flight and constructing model planes. You may want to try other model planes or even design your own plane that will stay in the air as long as possible. I hope you enjoy flying your Delta Dart. Until next time, this is Dr. Zoon saying, see you real soon.